Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all had a good rest, or I don't know, maybe preparing for rest, or you're just in the middle of the day. Who knows? I just woke up about 30 minutes or so ago. So anyway, we're moving on with the next couple of chapters of Peerless. We'll be reading chapters 46 through 49. So I hope you all enjoy them, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it, shall we? Chapter 46. If Cuibuchu had reacted a little too slowly, or worse, not reacted at all, Yushu would surely have seen something wrong with this picture. But the chief of the Zuoye Bureau was the chief for a reason. Regardless of what curses he was hurling at Feng Xiao in his mind, the moment Feng Xiao pulled Cuibuchu's hand toward his body, Cuibuchu grabbed Feng Xiao's wrist and pinned it to the wall. His other hand came up to seize Feng Xiao's chin as he pretended to kiss him. All the hair on Feng Xiao's body stood on end, not due to Cuibuchu's bold actions, but the touch of his hands. Cuibuchu had just examined a corpse. He'd even pried open the man's mouth, and afterward, he'd washed only once with soap. He felt as if those corpses were intimately caressing him through Cuibuchu's hand, and discomfort exploded through him. Yet Cuibuchu seemed to think this still insufficient. He released Feng Xiao's wrist and brought his hand to the small of his back, palm trailing downward. "That's more than enough." Feng Xiao squeezed out each word through gritted teeth. "You didn't seem to think it was enough last time you tried to screw me over, Cuibuchu said with a smile. It's too early in the morning for this. Feng Xiao mouthed soundlessly. "Yushu is a clever man. If anything is off, he'll notice." "That's why you must bear it," said Cuibuchu. "Don't give yourself away now." They were pressed skin to skin, breaths mingling and noses brushing. To Yushu, it appeared he'd stumbled upon an indecent, thrill-seeking couple chasing pleasure in broad daylight. These deviants had no concept of propriety, neck and neck as they murmured into each other's necks. It was rare to see such a dissolute woman in the capital. Were people really so open in these border towns? Yushu frowned slightly at their intertwined fingers. Disgust flashed over his face, and he paused in his steps. He turned from the alley and left without a backward glance. Feng Xiao and Cuibuchu quickly made to retreat. Cuibuchu released Feng Xiao and took a couple of steps back. Feng Xiao raised his eyebrows. Cuibuchu shrugged, to avoid being shoved first. "Remember, Deputy Chief Feng, I'm a scholar without even the strength to truss a chicken. I can't handle you flinging me into the wall the way you did before." "Enough!" snapped Feng Xiao. "Let's follow them, quick." It was the middle of the day, and there were quite a few people about, but strangely, after Yushu and his companion left the mouth of the alley, they deliberately turned onto the road that was most crowded. Feng Xiao grabbed Cuibuchu around the waist as he walked. To Cuibuchu, it felt as if there was a breeze beneath his feet, like he was gliding forward effortlessly. Though their pace was brisk through the crowd, they never bumped into anyone. In the distance, they saw Yushu and his companion sit down at a roadside noodle stall. People milled about them, and they had no cover. But sitting in the open like this also made it easy for them to notice any suspicious characters approaching and was more convenient for conversation. "We shouldn't get any closer," Feng Xiao said. He looked for a tea house, and they entered and took a seat. They were separated from Yushu by 3 or 4 stalls. It was a safe enough distance, but even Feng Xiao's excellent hearing couldn't catch what they were saying. "Are Yushu's martial arts superior to yours?" Cuibuchu asked curiously. "About the same." Feng Xiao pulled out a teacup and set it on the table, then ordered a pot of tea. Yet rather than drinking the tea, he began rinsing the cups. He poured tea into one cup, then rinsed another with it. He poured that tea out, refilled the cup, and started rinsing all over again. After repeating the process 5 times, he stopped, brows knit in disdain. "Right now, we're aware of Yushu, but Yushu isn't aware of us. This is an advantage. Before we figure out what he's doing here, we shouldn't let him catch us. Stop staring. A master's senses are sharp. He might notice." Cui Buchu looked away. I'm watching their mouths. Their mouths? Asked Feng Xiao. He instantly understood. Lip reading. Mm-hmm. Feng Xiao would never admit Cui Buchu had managed to surprise him yet again. Well, what did they say? The other person's back is to me, and there are too many people in the way. I only caught 2 sentences of what Yushu said. The first was, will Duan Qihu attend the banquet? The second was, do as we discussed. Feng Xiao glanced in Yushu's direction and saw he was getting up to leave. The monk was quickly swallowed by the crowd, his destination unknown. What do you think? Asked Feng Xiao. First, Cui Buchu said, I'm guessing Yushu and Duan Qihu know each other, but Duan Qihu doesn't know Yushu is here in Tiamoa. Second, their plans will harm Duan Qihu in some way. Feng Xiao pondered this. Yushu is a mysterious character. How can the Prince of Jin have any connection with a bandit leader thousands of miles away? Cui Buchu correctly read this as an offer to exchange information. The Tuoya Bureau only knows that he was a disciple of Tiantai sect in Jiangnan before he started working for the Prince of Jin. It should be impossible to achieve his level of martial arts at such a young age without devoting years of arduous training within his sect. On the other hand, Duan Qihu's activities have always been constrained to the western border. He's never been to Jiangnan. Logically, they shouldn't share any connection. One doesn't have to stay within their sect at all times, even if they're training arduously, said Feng Xiao. Look at me, someone born with outstanding talent who can achieve what others could merely dream, even at a young age. We exist too, you know. Cui Buchu patted himself, then ducked his head and looked around as if he'd dropped something. Did you see it? See what? My respect for you. Where did it go? Feng Xiao was silent. After drawing a little blood, Cui Buchu's mood was buoyant. Let's not delve into possible grudges between Yushu and Duan Qihu. Duan Qihu is surrounded by martial experts, and he himself is by all accounts a first-class master. Never mind sending an accomplice. Even if Yushu went himself, he might not fell Duan Qihu in a single blow. So how is Yushu's ally supposed to get close to him? Feng Xiao stroked his chin. Poison? Honey trap? No, that can't be right. If it was that easy, Duan Qihu would be dead a few times over by now. There must be many who despise him. If Yushu isn't going personally, he needs a suitable opportunity, a time when Duan Qihu's guard is lowered, or when he has no choice but to lower it. He looked up at Cui Buchu in realization. The two of them stared at each other before exclaiming in unison, "The birthday banquet!" At that moment, the man who'd been sitting with Yushu stood. He paid the bill, then left in the opposite direction as the monk. There was no time to discuss. Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao threw down their money and sprang up to tell him. How are his martial arts? Just as before, Feng Xiao half-carried Cui Buchu as they sped through the city. Cui Buchu noted that Feng Xiao kept noticeably closer to their mark this time, less cautious than he'd been with Yushu. Not bad, but not good enough to discover me, Feng Xiao said. The other man walked slowly. He seemed to be in no hurry. As they watched, he stopped along the road to purchase 2 savory pastries and a long skewer of snacks before continuing on his way. They soon realized the man's destination was an ordinary one. All around were the houses and courtyards of ordinary citizens. He turned to enter a yard with 2 children playing at the gate. On seeing him, they ran to welcome him with calls of, "Daddy!" He handed out the snacks, then scooped the child into his arms, talking and laughing with them as he carried them inside. Feng Xiao and Cui Buchu let the trail end there. They agreed to split up, each going their separate ways to the bases of the Jiejian and Zuoye bureaus to look into the man's background. Cui Buchu's men had lived in Tiamoa 5 or 6 years and knew the city like the back of their hands. They could recite the history of anyone of even minor fame by heart. He merely needed to point them in the right direction and a report would quickly follow. "My lord, The master of that house is a man named Peng Xiang. He's Xing Mao's third steward. Cui Buchu's face was impassive as he listened. Xing Mao seems to have a lot of stewards. It's just as they say, the Zuoye agent agreed. Xing Mao's family is powerful. The clan has considerable wealth and is successful in business. In addition to his family members, he has 3 stewards who help manage clan affairs. It's said the head steward is Xing Mao's closest confidant and a man of no little influence himself. Ordinary folk rarely glimpse him. The second steward manages Xing Mao's external affairs, while the third steward is responsible for more trivial matters of the household. Upon hearing the last words, Cui Buchu started as if he'd realized the answer to some of his questions. I heard Xing Mao's mother is celebrating her birthday in a few days. Then this third steward must be responsible for the banquet? If nothing's changed, that should be correct. Now this will be a sight to see, Cui Buchu thought. He bid the man farewell and hurried back to the inn. Feng Xiao had returned a step ahead of him. When Cui Buchu arrived, he was relaxing in their room, drinking tea and eating snacks. The moment he heard the crack of the door, he smiled. Looks like you found something. What are you so happy about? Cui Buchu asked, suspicious. Do you have a grudge against Duan Qihu? Are you so thrilled he's going to die? I have no grudge against Duan Qihu, but it's true someone wants him dead. No, I'm happy because someone has kindly handed me a pillow right as I was about to doze off. He produced an invitation and pushed it across the table toward Cui Buchu. Cui Buchu picked it up. His brows shot up in surprise. You tell me, said Feng Xiao gleefully. Should I not be happy? Cui Buchu nodded. It's indeed convenient timing. His fake identity as nephew of the king of Kucha had been revealed mere hours ago, yet a banquet invitation for Xing Mao's mother's 60th birthday had already arrived. Xing Mao was quick on the draw and a skilled diplomat to boot. Small wonder he'd dominated Qianmo for so many years. Feng Xiao had clearly also discovered the identity of Yu Xiu's accomplice. Xing Mao's third steward is colluding with a counselor of the Prince of Jin, a disciple of the Tiantai sect. How fascinating. I was wondering how to get my hands on an invitation, but it seems the king of Kucha's influence is not to be underestimated. My wife just lost our child, and her body took a severe toll. She should be lying in bed recuperating. Look how the autopsy frayed your nerves. You needn't attend the banquet. I'll take Qiao Xian. For my lord's sake, Ah Feng would walk through fire and flood. A lost child is a trifle. Who knows what you may encounter at the banquet? How can I be at ease if I'm not by your side? In other words, don't even think about hoarding all the credit for yourself. Cui Buchu smiled. You're a married woman. If you can't learn how to be an obedient wife, I'll have to set you aside. Even if I haven't given you a child yet, my lord's flesh and blood has lain within my belly. Is your lordship so callous? On the surface, they were talking nonsense, but Cui Buchu truly didn't want Feng Xiao to attend the banquet. Feng Xiao, however, insisted, and if Cui Buchu obstructed him, he'd undoubtedly find a way to spoil Cui Buchu's plans. At the same time, Qiao Xian was on her way over to perform her routine check of Cui Buchu's pulse. She just reached the door when she heard Cui Buchu's voice inside. The only thing you're good for is producing children. Don't think so highly of yourself. Qiao Xian stopped short. She stood in the doorway wearing a bewildered expression, wondering what she'd missed. Chapter 47. Several days passed in a flash. For all their intelligence gathering, Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao had no first-hand experience with the 2 major powers in Qianmo. Only now did they come to understand the true influence of local kingpin Xing Mao. Since the day they received the invitation, decorations had begun to fill the city. In the space of a few days, the streets of Qianmo were festooned with red lanterns and silk ribbon. Qianmo wasn't large, but such lavish festivities were something only the wealthiest of families could bear. Powerful as a clan and successful in business, this wasn't sufficient to describe Xing Mao's influence. He was a descendant of the king of Shanshan himself. When their homeland was invaded, The king fled to Qianmo with the contents of the royal treasury and more than 4,000 surviving households. 3 generations later, Xing Mao's operations touched every corner of the city. It was said his business had branches as close as Liugong City and as far away as the capitals of Great Sui and southern Chun. The greater one's wealth, the more one needed to guard it. When Xing Mao was 5 years old, the king of Shanshan had invited many martial arts masters to teach his grandson. Unfortunately, Xing Mao was a mediocre student. Even now, his skills were third class at best. But he didn't lack for bodyguards. Whenever he went out, it was with a mighty procession, ostentatious as any parade. When Feng Xiao and Cui Bichu arrived at the gates of the Xing residence, they were met with an awful din. The street jostled with the carriage of guests. Guards stood in neat ranks not only before the entrance, but around the entire manor. As they approached the gates, Feng Xiao and Cui Bichu spied the third steward, flanked by 2 guards as he welcomed guests. Cui Bichu smiled, a sight not at all inferior to the crown prince and the Prince of Jin's royal tours. This is what happens when the emperor's influence is distant. Xing Mao no longer has a kingdom of Shanshan, but he still fancies himself ruler of these lands. Feng Xiao brought a thoughtful finger to his chin. They say his subordinates and family call him king in his presence. Carriages were parked all around them, many exquisitely appointed. They alone had come from the inn on foot, without any carriage or accompanying attendants. Most of the guests were prominent figures in the city or members of the Jianghu with connections to Xing Mao. In comparison, Cui Bichu and Feng Xiao appeared downright shabby. They even had to carry their gift themselves. Xing Mao had invited the nephew of the king of Kucha, so Cui Bichu had to attend. If Jin Lian were to also attend, the only suitable disguise for her was a maid, but a single maid accompanying the king's nephew would also be conspicuous. Cui Bichu had ordered Xiao Xian to stay behind and protect her lest Fouar threaten them again. But as a consequence, he and Feng Xiao looked all the more drab beside the other guests with their throngs of servants and guards. They ignored the curious gazes that followed them on all sides. At that moment, their thick skin came in handy. As they took their places behind the other guests, completely at ease and without the slightest hint of embarrassment, the pair took the opportunity to observe the crowd with great interest. Every guest had brought gifts, both large and small. Someone eager to flaunt their wealth had even brought a jade tree as tall as a man, hung with gold and silver. It drew countless exclamations of wonder. In contrast, Cui Bichu only carried a box the length of his arm. The third steward was accustomed to seeing all sorts of precious gifts. When he saw the simple box, more like a complimentary gift a shop might offer when purchasing candied fruits than a lavish birthday present, he was momentarily stunned. He looked at this guest's invitation again. Kucha produced large quantities of iron. It was rich in resources and far from destitute as a nation. Yet Cui Bichu and Feng Xiao's attire, while not cheap, was still a far cry from the luxurious fabrics one would expect. The steward knew better than to comment, but the servant beside him couldn't curb his look of contempt as he received the box. What cheek! Cui Bichu was displeased. How dare you turn your nose up at our gift? The attendant holding the box stared at him, baffled. Cui Bichu's tone was haughty. Ah Feng, open the box and show them our gift. In full view of the crowd, Feng Xiao, in a rare moment of obedience, took the box from the attendant. After untying the silk ribbon, he pulled out a plain-looking dagger. Watch, said Feng Xiao. He drew the dagger from its sheath. Its blade was glazed a dense frosty white, as if encased in ice and snow. The crowd watched as Feng Xiao lifted his hand and gave it a light flick. The attendant who'd taken the box was still waiting for something to happen when his clothes suddenly fell away, leaving him naked as the day he was born. A woman's scream finally brought the attendant to his senses. Mortified, he turned beet red and dashed away to clothe himself. Cui Buchu barked out a mocking laugh, then said loftily, Duxin has seen all manner of treasures. What do you take us for? How could we bring some common gift? We would be no different from peasants or nobodies. After witnessing the sharpness of the dagger, the crowd marveled. It seemed Kucha's reputation was well deserved. No one dared look down on Cui Buchu. The third steward, recalling his duty, quickly took the dagger with both hands and handed it to an attendant at his side with great care. He smiled. I can only apologize for my subordinate's rudeness toward Shanglangjuan. Your lordship, I beg you to forgive us, if only for the sake of my master's banquet today. Please come in. Your seats are prepared. This way, please. All the guests before them had been led in by attendants. Only Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao were granted the third steward's personal attention. The grandeur of the Xing residence went without saying. Thanks to the large number of attendants this year, it was impossible to fit all the guests inside the main hall. To accommodate everyone, they had spread the banquet over both the inside and outside. Only a small number of tables meant for Xing Mao's most valued guests were placed within the hall. The courtyard outside seated many more, and it was here that most of the guests were directed. Even with the third steward guiding them, Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao didn't qualify for the interior seats. The steward led them to one of the tables in the courtyard closest to the entrance of the hall. It was probably an excellent seat. Cui Buchu knew initial arrangements would have placed them even farther back. It was only thanks to their little altercation at the gate that the steward made this last-minute change. He peered inside. In addition to the 2 seats for the hostess at the front, there were 4 more on either side. A total of 8 distinguished guests. One of them must be Duan Qihu. Cui Buchu made a face. What's this? A relative of the Kuchean royal family doesn't merit a seat inside? The third steward's smile was fixed on his face. He cupped his hands politely. I beg your lordship's understanding. Those 8 seats are my lord's dearest friends of many years. They are not assigned based on rank or status. The distinguished guests in the courtyard include such eminent personages as the leader of Qionghai sect, juniors from the Wei family of Guanzhong, and the young master of the Xianlin sect, among others. Their seats are all set far behind yours. Cui Buchu waved his hand with fake impatience. Enough. The madam of the family is celebrating her 60th birthday. I have no interest in starting petty squabbles. The third steward smiled wider. Your lordship is truly a magnanimous man. He still had many guests to receive, so with an apology, he left. Feng Xiao sat beside Cui Buchu, plucked a grape from the platter on the table, and tossed it into his mouth. He peered around curiously. The guests took their seats one after the other. 4 of the 8 seats of the inner hall were filled. Feng Xiao didn't recognize any of the occupants, but he heard Cui Buchu say, In the inner hall, that looks like Wei Huofang from the Wei family of Guangzhong. I don't recognize anyone else. They're probably not from the Jianghu. Xing Mao will definitely place Duan Qihu's seat just below his own as a show of respect, said Feng Xiao. We're too far away here. It's inconvenient if we need to make any move. We'll have to play it by ear then, said Cui Buchu. By the way, where did you find such an incredibly sharp dagger? Feng Xiao finished his grapes, then skewered a piece of honey melon with a silver fork and popped it in his mouth. He smiled. I infused it with my own internal energy. It's more than sharp. Using it to split a mountain wouldn't be out of the question. But when you drew the dagger, weren't there wisps of white around it? Cui Buchu asked suspiciously. Feng Xiao chuckled. I placed the dagger in the snow for a few days, then used my own internal energy to awaken the frost on it. Wouldn't that create your white vapor? I bought that thing at a weapons shop on the east side of Qianmo. A mere 300 coppers, and we get to sample these wonderful delicacies. Well worth the price, if you ask me. Cui Buchu was speechless a moment. Is the Zhejiang Bureau so impoverished you can't even procure a decent gift? I traveled thousands of miles to this border city for an investigation, Feng Xiao said with complete conviction. You think that doesn't require money? Border cities are dry and dusty. Without my flower dew and smoothing oil, how could my hair and skin maintain their splendor? Your Qiao Xian is so stingy. Ask her to buy some hair oil, and it's like I'm killing her. My venerable self had no choice but to spend from my own pocket. What could Cui Buchu say? If Feng Xiao had pretended to pout like a maiden, Cui Buchu could have at least fired back a sarcastic remark or two. But right then, Feng Xiao wasn't putting on an act. He was utterly uncompromising, utterly imperious. Cui Buchu imagined Feng Xiao sitting in their room at the inn, feet planted wide like a mighty general, shaving his stubble and combing oil through his precious hair. He couldn't stop his mouth from twitching. Men need to groom themselves too. Don't think they don't, Feng Xiao said, warming to his lecture. When someone's face is as peerless as mine, how can they honor the favor the heavens bestowed upon them if they don't cherish it? Your looks are a far sight below this venerable one, but you're still a handsome man. Alas, your body is sickly and will age faster than most, if you don't take care. I fear in another few years. He chuckled. Cui Buchu knew nothing good would follow, but he couldn't stop himself from asking, in another few years, what? I'll really be able to call you Daddy. Cui Buchu stared at the platter of fruit for a good while. He was afraid he'd really lose it this time and grind Feng Xiao's face into the grapes. A voice interrupted his dangerous thoughts. Pardon my intrusion. My name is Chen Ji. Would the lady and gentleman be so kind as to share their esteemed names? Cui Buchu raised his head. The young man, Chen Ji, had taken a seat beside Feng Xiao. His words were clearly directed at the lady. Cui Buchu was an afterthought. Ji? Which Ji? The punchable smirk Feng Xiao had worn while bickering with Cui Buchu had vanished, replaced with a shy smile. His gaze flitted slyly over Chen Ji, and he gracefully batted his long lashes. Such tactics had no effect on Cui Buchu, but they clearly worked on men who didn't know Feng Xiao. At the very least, Chen Ji was immediately affected. His gaze seemed to sparkle as he looked at Feng Xiao. Ji, composed of the characters Yu and Qi, as when the sky clears after rain. Chen Ji. Cui Buchu put the name with the person. A moment later, he'd recalled the man's background, the young master of the Xianlin sect of Guanzhong. The Xinlian sect wasn't classed among such great sects as Xuandu Mountain or the Tiantai sect, but it was still a name of some repute within the Jianghu. Chen Ji's skills were average, and he was known to have an arrogant and willful personality. He was not unlike Lin Yong, the young master of Yandang Mountain Estate. Perhaps all wealthy children who'd been pampered from birth and never experienced any setbacks were similar. Though Chen Jing's martial arts were nothing extraordinary, his father was the leader of the Xianlin sect. Thus, the Xing family had placed him in the seat next to Cui Buchu, a sensible choice. Another glance at the inner hall revealed that the host and guests had all arrived. Duan Qihu and Gao Yi sat just below Xing Mao, on his left and right respectively. Next to Xing Mao was an older matron, presumably Xing Mao's mother, the guest of honor. Cui Buchu had been contemplating how to get closer to Duan Qihu all this time. With the appearance of Chen Ji, a plan had suddenly presented itself. Feng Xiao seemed to have read his mind. He flashed a smirk and winked at Cui Buchu, then shoved the fruit platter across the table. This man thrived on chaos. Cui Buchu rolled his eyes. Then he picked up the fruit platter and threw it to the ground with a great crash. Instantly, the platter shattered to pieces, fruit rolling across the floor in all directions. Who could ignore such a commotion? The banquet went dead silent as everyone looked over, Xing Mao's group included. Chapter 48. Breaking the platter was only the first step. Cui Pichu leapt to his feet and pointed at Chen Ji. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the nephew of the king of Kucha. How dare you disrespect my wife, lusting after her right before my eyes? Today is the birthday of Duke Xing's mother, to which I was honored to be invited. I sincerely desire to congratulate Patriarch Xing, but instead I've encountered a shameless scoundrel under his roof. If this were Kucha, I would have you flogged to death. He made the entire speech in one breath, leaving no time to react. Chen Ji was momentarily stupefied. All I did was ask for her name. I haven't even touched her. How am I disrespecting her? He was no pushover, but Cui Pichu's attack was too sudden. Chen Ji had no ready retort. Their host, however, wasn't about to let them disrupt his banquet. At a pointed glance from Xing Mao, the head steward hurried forward to smooth things over. You're both my lord's guests today. There's no need to fight. Please think of my lord's reputation. My uncle often said the Duke Xing lives in Qianmo, and that he is one of the most formidable men of his generation. Cui Pichu sneered. To think, even my uncle could so misjudge someone. I represent the king of Kucha, yet I'm not even seated in the hall, forced instead to endure the blazing sun. Who would attend a banquet like this? Farewell. The head steward held up a placating hand and smiled. My lord misunderstands, he said. These arrangements were made by us lowly servants. The inner hall is too narrow, and space is limited. There isn't enough room. Cui Pichu cast him a sidelong glance. Isn't that just an excuse to snub people? He said disdainfully. Why not knock down the wall and merge everything into one? As if it was that easy. Would the house even be a house anymore? When Cui Pichu was trying to enrage someone, his manner grew so acrimonious as to be unbearable. The head steward felt an irresistible impulse to pound his face in, but he couldn't lose his temper now. He had to keep smiling. The lord is right to criticize the arrangement. This lowly one didn't take this into consideration. I invite the honorable couple to sit in the main hall. I shall prepare 2 seats at once. He waved his hand for an attendant, who immediately came to place the seats. The head steward ushered Cui Pichu and Feng Xiao inside. Xing Mao rose and personally walked to the center of the hall to welcome them. I offer both of you my sincere apologies for our lack of manners. Please, drink up. Cui Pichu's goal from the beginning had been to infiltrate the inner hall. Now, he looked toward Duan Qihu and said loudly, I've heard there are 2 great men in the city of Qianmo. One is Duke Xing, the other Duke Duan. Since I was fortunate enough to come here, I cannot miss the opportunity to sit closer to Duke Duan. You needn't trouble yourself with changing the arrangements. Just place my seat and my wife's behind Duke Duan. Duan Qihu laughed heartily. To think Shang Langzhuan regards me so highly. There's plenty of space beside me. Why not sit together? Cui Pichu was overjoyed. I'd be only too glad to. Usually, each guest had their own seat and table. Sharing a table was a display of closeness. Cui Pichu showed no courtesy whatsoever. He tossed aside the head steward and strode over to sit beside Duan Qihu. Upon seeing that Xing Mao had no objection, the head steward could do nothing but curse silently as he set up another table for Feng Xiao next to Cui Pichu. In one stroke, not only had Cui Pichu and Feng Xiao secured a seat close to Duan Qihu, they were but a few steps from Xing Mao. All that was left was the unfortunate Chen Ji, who'd suffered Cui Pichu's wrath for no reason. By the time he came to his senses, Cui Pichu had attached himself to Duan Qihu. No matter how much he wanted to flip the table in rage, it was too late. He could only glare angrily at Cui Pichu's back. The head steward, still wary of these guests creating a scene, went over to console Chen Ji. Whatever he said, Chen Ji's anger was quickly replaced with joy. He paid Cui Pichu no further heed and gladly took his seat. The disturbance was thus settled. The head steward breathed a sigh of relief and silently grumbled to himself. The third steward had arranged today's banquet. This kind of task should have fallen to him, yet he disappeared to who knew where. I've traveled to Kucha a few years back and had the honor of meeting His Majesty. Tell me, how does he fare? Duan Qihu asked. My uncle has no issues eating or sleeping. He can draw his bow and shoot eagles on his horse. And of it, he can fight wolves barehanded. He's already been strong as an ox. But 2 of his grandsons recently passed from illness. It broke his heart. He refused even his favorite dances and music. If not for that, he would have been the one to come to the Central Plains. Since Cui Buchu was pretending to be the nephew of the king of Kucha, he'd done his homework in advance. Otherwise, he might have fooled Gao Yi, but he would never deceive wily old foxes like Xing Mao and Duan Qihu. The king of Kucha really did have a nephew named Shang Jing. Because of his poor health, he'd removed to a villa outside the city at a young age and was rarely seen. For every dozen words Cui Buchu spoke, at least 7 or 8 were true. It was easy to trust him. Moreover, Duan Qihu and Xing Mao had both heard of the early deaths of the royal grandsons. After hearing Cui Buchu mention it too, they put aside any doubts about his identity. Duan Qihu nodded and sighed. Send the king my condolences and tell him this. Please be at rest. Xing Mao clapped his hands. The dishes, ready and waiting for his command, appeared in a steady stream. Jars of wine were brought up one by one. The seals cracked open before the guests. Their fragrance rose into the air. One sniff told Xing Mao's guests it was a good, aged vintage. Even those familiar with fine wines across the land couldn't help their mouths watering in anticipation. Beautiful maids stepped up to pour wine for the guests, and everyone raised their cups to congratulate the madam on her birthday. Xing Mao drank the toast and knelt before his mother, thanking her for raising him. Duan Qihu had come in a show of goodwill today and afforded his host every courtesy. When a maid bent to pour his wine, he too raised his cup and said magnanimously, "May your fortune be as vast as the East Sea, your time as enduring as the southern mountains." Just as he was about to tip his head back and drink, Cui Buchu cried, "Wait, Duke Duan!" He smiled. "Why is Duke Duan's wine jar different from mine? Is it because Duke Duan is a powerful man in Tiamoor that the host's family offers him different treatment?" It was possible to argue that Cui Buchu's outburst when he saw a man flirting with his wife outside was reasonable. But now he was making trouble for the sake of it. And when Cui Buchu exerted his troublemaking ability to the fullest, it was enough to drive anyone mad. The head steward, for example, was beyond irritated with him. "Shanglangjuan has misunderstood," he snapped. "There is deep significance to our wine jars. We have 4 kinds, plum blossom, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum, which we store in our cellars in the spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Each of these wines has a distinct flavor, but they're equally precious and unique to our estate. Once you finish your jar, you may, of course, taste one of the others. There's no need to work yourself up over it." Professional nuisance Cui Buchu pretended not to see the irritated twist to the head steward's smile. He pointed to the cup in Duan Qihu's hand. "Duke Duan's wine must taste exceptionally extraordinary. I wish to switch cups with Duke Duan." Duan Qihu laughed and handed over his cup. "Not a problem at all. I'll give you this cup, and someone can fetch me another." Xing Mao furrowed his brow, displeasure simmering in him, but in the end he said nothing. Cui Buchu had dared to repeatedly disrupt his mother's birthday banquet, and Xing Mao had 100 ways to make him regret it later. But when Cui Buchu received Duan Qihu's cup, he didn't simply accept it. He handed it to the lovely maid who just poured for Duan Qihu. "Here, you drink it." The maid froze, then quickly backed up a few steps and cast a pleading glance toward the steward, who had endured just about enough of this menace. He warned him, still smiling, "Shanglangjuan, today is my lord's mother's birthday banquet. Please show some restraint." Cui Buchu's brow rose in mock surprise. "How am I not restrained? Everyone knows Duke Duan and Duke Xing are rivals. Who's to say some scoundrel wouldn't try to sow discord by poisoning Duke Duan, then framing the Xing family? I'm merely taking precautions that will clear Duke Xing of suspicion, aren't I?" The steward had reached the end of his rope. He stepped forward and made to grab Cui Buchu's shoulder. "You little pest! You're not here to attend the banquet. You came to pick a fight." This man was Xing Mao's closest confidant in addition to being his highest ranking and most trusted subordinate. He was a strong martial artist. His strike was as swift as lightning. Even if Cui Buchu had been trained in martial arts, he might not have been able to dodge. But of course, he didn't know any at all. Yet before the steward could make him scream in pain and scare him out of spewing more nonsense, someone else gripped his hand, arresting his movements in the pinch of a mere forefinger and thumb. The head steward swallowed down agony and looked over his shoulder. Feng Xiao smiled at him shyly. That smile sent a tremor through the head steward's body. He instantly lost the ability to retaliate. Ignoring the head steward, Cui Buchu pushed the cup toward the maid. Once you've drunk this cup of wine, I shan't bother you any more, nor cause any further trouble for Duke Xing. The maid looked at the ground, utterly still. By now, Duan Qihu too had noticed something was wrong. Xing Mao was furious at the meddling Cui Buchu, but what enraged him more was losing face in front of Duan Qihu. The courtyard was festive yet, but guests in the inner hall had stopped drinking to look over at the commotion. The atmosphere had turned awkward. He barked out, "Since Xianglang Jun says so, just drink it." Now that Xing Mao had spoken, the maid had no choice but to take the wine from Cui Buchu. But it seemed she'd been scared silly. Her hand trembled as she held it, spilling wine everywhere. Cui Buchu grabbed her wrist and pressed the cup to her mouth. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "It's only a little wine. What are you scared of? You act like it's poisoned." Just as the wine was about to tip into her mouth, the maid broke free of Cui Buchu and turned to pounce on Duan Qihu. Light flashed. A dagger, hidden until now, leapt to her hand. The sharp point headed straight for Duan Qihu's chest. Duan Qihu launched into the air like a great eagle spreading its wings in flight. Not only did he avoid the maid's fatal strike, he kicked her wrist as he landed, turning the dagger away. As she stumbled and fell forward over the low table, the dagger in her own hand pierced her chest and killed her on the spot. Screams split the air. The once lively banquet was transformed as everyone's faces paled with fear. The guests in the inner hall stood and backed away, one after another. Xing Mao pointed at Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao as he raged. "Guards, seize them!" Cui Buchu sneered. "What good is capturing me? Yesterday, I saw your third steward on the street, conspiring with someone to kill Duan Qihu. Why else would I make trouble at the banquet? And it's just as I feared." "Xing Mao!" Duan Qihu's face was like a thundercloud. "I came here in good faith, yet you greeted me with a Hongmen banquet?" Two guards he'd brought adopted protective stances, as though really afraid Xing Mao might attack at any moment. "I knew nothing of this!" Xing Mao was furious. If Duan Qihu died here today, jumping into the Yellow River wouldn't be enough to wash himself clean of blame. Who but Xing Mao would want him dead? But if Xing Mao truly wanted to kill him, even sending a woman to seduce and poison him would be more effective than this crude method. Not to mention, today was his mother's birthday, and he was famously filial toward her. How could he kill a man in front of his own mother? But things had already come to this point. No matter who wanted to kill Duan Qihu, if he died, his influence would be absorbed by Xing Mao. Without their patriarch, the Duan family would be an eagle with broken wings. In fact, perhaps he should finish what someone else had started. As his thoughts turned, the darkness in his eyes deepened like a tempest brewing. Xing Mao's three stewards had been with him for many years and were familiar with their master's ways. Feng Xiao had obstructed the head steward, but the second steward was standing by. With a silent wave of his hand, the guards of the Xing residence gathered to surround the inner hall. The instant their master gave the command, they rushed forward to slay Duan Qihu. No matter how skilled the former bandit was, he couldn't possibly escape this watertight blockade. Shit, thought Duan Qihu. He'd attended today's banquet because he was sure Xing Mao would never act against him there. Who could have guessed he'd find himself in such dire straits? Whether or not Xing Mao was responsible for the poisoned wine no longer mattered. Duan Qihu, too, could see the murderous intent in Xing Mao's eyes. Was he finally going to his grave? Here and now? Still in Feng Xiao's grasp, the head steward finally couldn't take the pain. He shrieked in agony. Feng Xiao smiled. It seems I've been too rough, but since you're the one who tried to attack my husband, I'm afraid you'll have to endure it. The head steward collapsed to the ground, motionless. Feng Xiao's figure flickered, and the second steward felt a wind rushing toward him. His heart thumped as he threw out a strike, meeting the enemy head on. Their palms slammed against each other. The second steward tasted salty sweetness surging up his throat. He coughed blood and collapsed backward. In contrast, Feng Xiao was completely unscathed. He turned to Xing Mao. You see, even if all your men come at me together, I'll walk out of here without a scratch. Perhaps I'll even bring Duan Qihu with me. When had such an unparalleled martial artist arrived in tiny Xiamo? The man who claimed to be the nephew of the king of Kucha was as weak as a kitten, yet his wife was hiding such incredible abilities. Duan Qihu considered himself skilled, but saw immediately that he was outmatched. He knew Fo'ar, the foremost expert of the Goktur Khaganate, yet thought even he might not be able to defeat this woman. Who were these people? Xing Mao was enraged. Who the hell are you? A beauty, naturally. Feng Xiao produced a handkerchief and wiped his hands, then twirled his fingers in a delicate flourish. The handkerchief fluttered through the air and landed precisely atop the steward's head. The man was speechless. Rather than worrying about us, Cui Buchu said indifferently, perhaps you should be more concerned with the traitor in your household. Duan Qihu has 2 sons, and his eldest is grown. Should Duan Qihu perish here today, that son will inherit everything and avenge his father. The 2 of you will be at open war. Even if you win, it will be a costly victory. Remember the tale of the sandpiper and the clam. Who is the fisherman who will profit from their squabbling and reap them both? This thought had occurred to Duan Qihu as well. While he was still suspicious of Xing Mao, he had some reservations. Xing Mao's face flashed through a host of emotions, but when he finally spoke, it was decisive. Bring me Peng Xiang, now. If he resists, do whatever you need to get him here. Only make sure he can still speak. The head steward's wrist had been crushed by Feng Xiao, but in the face of the storm tearing through the residence, his injury was nothing. He shrugged painfully upright and dashed off to find the third steward. The birthday banquet had become a battlefield. Xing Mao took a deep breath and squashed his frustration. He first ordered an attendant to escort his mother away to rest, then addressed the other guests. This incident has been most unfortunate. Everyone has had a shock. I owe you all my deepest apologies once the culprit is found. For now, please remain seated and enjoy the food and wine. As if anyone was in the mood to eat, all they could do was sit and wait. There was no chance anyone would be allowed to leave the Xing residence before this matter was resolved. Xing Mao was reluctant to believe his own steward had betrayed him, but all signs pointed to the man. The arrangements for the banquet had been entirely in the third steward's hands. He couldn't escape responsibility. Yet, as it often happens, the situation was thornier than it first appeared. A short time later, the head steward came dashing back. Although he'd run the whole way, his face was paler than before. Xing Mao knew at once that something had again gone wrong. Sure enough, the head steward gasped out, Peng Xiao, he hung himself to avoid punishment. Chapter 49. The third steward, Peng Xiang, had died in the woodshed of the Xing residence. Servants were always coming in and out of the woodshed, and the door was never locked. The head steward had taken men and scoured the estate for Peng Xiang. Amid the chaos, someone had thoughtlessly pushed open the door and found the third steward swinging from the rafters. No one wanted their dirty laundry aired, but the situation was already a mess. Duan Qihu said he wished to inspect the corpse and refused to back down. Xing Mao had no choice but to lead him there himself. Of course, Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao followed. No few guests also came to squawk. Among them, Magistrate Gao Yi and the man whose flirtations had been foiled by Cui Buchu, Chen Ji. He'd never seen anything so sensational before, and his eyes shone with the novel thrill of it. If the third steward, Peng Xiang, was aware of his circumstances in the underworld, he was probably quite unhappy. Fright remained etched on his face. Perhaps he'd regretted his suicide before his last breath. but had been unable to break free and submitted unwillingly to his fate. Yet Cui Buchu remembered Feng Xiao's words. The third steward was a martial artist, albeit an average one. If he really plotted with Yu Xiu to kill Duan Qihu and feared he was exposed, why would he not choose to run away instead of hanging himself for fear of punishment? Even if he had been set on suicide, slitting his throat would have been simpler and more efficient than hanging himself. Much more the kind of thing a martial artist would do. While everyone was looking down at the body, Feng Xiao was also looking, but his eyes were pinned on Cui Buchu. When Cui Buchu's lashes were downcast, his brows pinched in a frown, there was a gentleness to him. It was night and day from his usual demeanor. Feeling Feng Xiao's gaze on him, he turned his head, puzzled, as if to ask, "What do you want?" He's probably afraid you're going to touch the corpse again and make him do it too. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Whenever you make that face, I know you're getting ready to make someone's life miserable. Those around them could see his lips moving, but couldn't hear what he said. Feng Xiao had used a sound transmission technique to send those words straight to Cui Buchu's ears. Cui Buchu smiled at him with teeth bared, then lowered his head to examine the corpse. "There's something in his hand!" someone called out. The head steward directed someone to pry the third steward's fingers open. Upon it were 4 words written in blood. "Pay blood for blood." They then looked at his other palm. Again, there were 4 words. "Heaven's law spares none." "There's a wound on him." As they lifted the third steward's hand, his sleeve had slid down to reveal a cut along his forearm. The head steward frowned. The cut was shallow and not obviously poisoned, but he couldn't tell much more. Could the third steward have made the cut himself before he died? Had he instructed the maid to poison Duan Qihu, then felt guilt when it failed and chosen suicide? Duan Qihu's lip curled in a sneer. "Oh, but Duke Xing has his ways. After failing to kill your target, you silenced your minion. You've destroyed the evidence. Now what recourse do I have?" Xing Mao was incensed. "If I wanted to kill you, why would I jump through so many hoops? Nothing's stopping me from giving the order now. I guarantee you wouldn't walk out here alive. Someone else is behind this, an instigator who intends to profit from our conflict." Gao Yi was silent. If Duan Qihu and Xing Mao started killing each other, it was obvious who'd benefit the most. Gao Yi himself. With Duan Qihu and Xing Mao's influence collapsed, Qianmo would belong to him. He could become a county magistrate with real authority and manage the city properly. It wasn't that he didn't wish for this, but his faction was the weakest of the 3. It was impossible. "If Duke Xing agrees, I will send someone to fetch the coroner for an autopsy," Gao Yi offered. "No need," Cui Buchu stood. "This man didn't hang himself. He was strung up after he died. That wound on his arm is posthumous, left by his killer." Duan Qihu found it hard to believe the nephew of the king of Kucha knew anything about examining corpses, but he hadn't the wherewithal just now to question the man's identity. He frowned. "How do you know?" "Look at his neck." Cui Buchu pointed at the third steward's throat. When someone is hanged, their body is pulled downward. The ligament marks on the neck should be deep at the front, but shallow on the other side. The knot here in the noose will also leave bruises. But see here, the marks on his neck are even all the way around. He was strangled to death with the rope first, then hung. Everyone looked closely. It was exactly as Cui Buchu had said. Yet this only invited more questions. If the third steward had been strangled, who within the Xing residence had killed him? And why? The group looked at Xing Mao, who roared, "I too want to know the identity of the killer." "Duke Xing, calm yourself," Cui Buchu said coolly. "I don't believe you're responsible. With your ability, you wouldn't need to go to so much trouble for so little gain. It's very likely the maid attempted to poison Duan Xiong under this steward's orders. But in that case, who in the Xing residence could have killed him? Therein lies the crux of the problem." "The Xing residence is heavily guarded. I know all my subordinates inside out," Xing Mao snapped. "They'd never betray me." Seeing Duan Qihu's mocking smile, he realized he'd gravely misspoken. Hadn't his third steward already done so? A traitor had revealed himself, and he might not be the only one. Xing Mao remembered seeing Peng Xiang at the start of the banquet. He had been weaving through the crowd, making last-minute arrangements. Less than 2 hours later, he was dead. Cui Buchu seemed to sense his thoughts. The woodshed's not far from the kitchen. The cooks were no doubt busy preparing dishes for the banquet, with many people coming and going. If there was a loud noise in the woodshed, someone would have heard, but no one noticed a thing until the third steward was long dead. To kill him so quietly, the murderer must have been much stronger than the third steward, observed Feng Xiao. Correct. Xing Mao frowned deeply. In all the Xing family, those who were strong enough to have killed the third steward were only the head steward, the second steward, and several skilled guards. But when the incident occurred, these guards had been at his side, and the head and second steward had been with him as well. If not these, then the murderer must be someone who had infiltrated the residence from outside. When I first arrived in Qianmo, I heard the Xing residence was large, but also secure and impenetrable. Anyone entering or leaving must identify themselves. Duke Xing can likely recite the names and backgrounds of all 30 guests who came today. Xing Mao nodded. Peng Xiang was in charge of the arrangements for the banquet, but not the estate's security, and I personally signed off on the guest list. He had no chance to tamper with it. He looked to his head steward. The man fell to his knees on the floor of the shed. Master, please think. This lowly one would never collude with a traitor like Peng Xiang. Your second steward, Lu Jiu, was also present when we arranged for today's guard. We followed our estate's long-standing rules. All the security measures were overseen by both of us. Xing Mao, too, thought it unlikely all 3 of his stewards had betrayed him. He shot a glance at Cui Buchu, hoping for another hint. Somewhere along the way, this young man he'd just met had gained control of the entire situation. With just a few words, he pulled their thoughts along, leaving them powerless to resist. Bring me the guest list, said Cui Buchu. Let no one leave the residence. Even before his orders, the second steward had long shut the gates. The guests who hadn't come over to spectate remained awkwardly in their seats, waiting for Xing Mao to release them. There were only 30 guests in total. With the exception of Gao Yi, Duan Qihu, Cui Buchu, and Feng Xiao, the rest were old acquaintances of Xing Mao. Even Chen Ji fell into that category, as his father was close friends with Xing Mao. When he'd received the invitation, he'd sent his son to congratulate the madam. The head steward checked off each name on the list, one by one, until he discovered an issue. One person was missing. Or rather, one person had entered the Xing residence and given a gift, but now was nowhere in sight. Where is Zhong Haomiao? The chief steward cried. Who? Cui Buchu glanced at Xing Mao, who frowned. He's a disciple of Qi Yue Monastery, he said. My mother goes off to listen to their lectures and is familiar with the abbot there. When we sent an invitation, they replied that the abbot is in seclusion, but that he'd send his eldest disciple to offer his congratulations. The steward sent someone running to Qi Yue Monastery at once for clarification. While they waited, Xing Mao took Cui Buchu and the others into a side hall, along with the third steward's body. It made for a bizarre scene, a group of living people sitting around a corpse. Gao Yi seemed to be ill at ease. Feng Xiao, sitting beside him, whispered, Is the magistrate feeling unwell? Gao Yi turned with a pained smile. Before I left my house, I performed a divination and received the reading of calamitous luck. I should have never attended the banquet today. The coins were right. What does this plot have to do with you? Nothing, of course. But what if they think I had a hand in it? Feng Xiao pressed his lips shut. Why had the court sent such a craven official, tossing coins to decide whether to leave the house, cowering like a mouse at each problem he encountered? If instead Cui Buchu were magistrate of Qianmo, Feng Xiao scarcely needed to wonder. Even if Cui Buchu spent 2 of every 3 days insensible with illness, he'd still turn Qianmo upside down. Not even dogs and chickens would find a moment of peace in the ensuing pandemonium. Xing Mao and Duan Qihu? They would be forced to stand aside. Only someone as brilliant as my venerable self could knock him down a peg. But no, there was also Yu Xiu. That man was also terribly unpredictable. As Feng Xiao wondered again over Yu Xiu, the runner the head steward had dispatched returned not with a message, but with Zhong Haomiao himself. His answer was quite unexpected. Yesterday, a guest had arrived at Qiyue Monastery. This man had once shown great kindness to the abbot of Qiyue Monastery, and as he was of age with Zhong Haomiao, the two got on instantly. When the guest heard Xing Mao's mother would be celebrating her 60th birthday today, he said he'd heard much of Xing Mao and would like a chance to meet him. Zhong Haomao had happily offered to bring him to the banquet. Unfortunately, the abbot suddenly hit an impasse in his cultivation, requiring him to stay and watch over him. Zhong Haomiao had handed the gift to his shirdi and instructed him to attend the banquet with their guest in his stead. But according to the gatekeeper and the head steward, only one man had come with the invitation. Zhong Haomiao was apologetic. It wasn't until your message that I discovered my shirdi wanted to play in the city and so parted with our guest on the journey and asked him to go alone. But my friend is a disciple of a prestigious sect. He'd never commit such a heinous crime. And who is this friend? Asked Gao Yi. Yan Xuexing. He's a disciple of the largest sect in southern Chun, Linchuan Academy. Everyone began pondering whether they'd heard this name. Everyone but Feng Xiao and Cui Bichu, whose eyes were instead on the others' faces. As they watched, Duan Qihu's expression shifted subtly. The change was fleeting, but neither Feng Xiao nor Cui Bichu doubted what they'd seen. Feng Xiao prodded Cui Bichu's thigh, silently communicating his suspicions. Cui Bichu moved his leg away, but Feng Xiao was persistent. He prodded him again. Annoyed, Cui Bichu grabbed Feng Xiao's meddlesome finger hard enough to break it. Feng Xiao flipped his wrist. In a flash, it was now Cui Bichu's hand trapped in his grip, unable to move. What are you doing? This little scene happened to catch Chen Ji's eye. He was still brimming with dissatisfaction over the fight Cui Bichu had picked with him earlier, and now it spilled over. Have you no reverence for the dead? Are you lacking in manners, or are you disrespecting Duke Xing? My sincerest apologies. My husband just can't control his wandering hands. It's this wife's fault for being too beautiful. Oh, if only I didn't have this face capable of toppling nations. Feng Xiao had never known how to spell the word shame. Faced with numerous gazes all screaming, to think this man spends his days drowning in pleasure despite a body that frail. Cui Bichu extricated his hand from Feng Xiao's grip with no change in expression. Wonderful. He'd yet to settle old accounts, but new ones had just been added. All right, everyone, so that is it for today. Let's go ahead and go over my notes, which again, I still don't have a lot. I feel like we're really digging into something here, and it's kind of like a detour from their main mission. And it's very interesting, but I don't have a lot of thoughts. So the first thing that I want to comment on is Feng Xiao and corpses. As soon as another corpse was discovered, I was just like, yep. Poor Feng Xiao, he just won't be able to catch a break. As long as there's a corpse involved, he's gonna... he's just gonna have a miserable moment in life. And lo and behold, yeah, that was just so funny. I don't know what else to say about those incidents with corpses, and I'm wondering how many more we'll get. Also, again, Cui Bichu with the explanations of deaths. He's so fluent in them. Although I will say now I feel like this is becoming, would trope be the right word for this? Becoming a trope that, oh, this person didn't drown, they were killed. Oh, this person didn't burn alive, they were killed. Well, I guess you could burn alive by killing, but oh, this person didn't die in a fire, they were killed. Oh, this person didn't hang themselves, they were killed. Like, is that going to keep being a thing? And if so, I don't know how I feel about that. I hope it won't continue to be this. And I just hope that, you know, if more corpses are involved, it'll be like clear, like, oh, this person was killed. Let's see how. Or no, this person actually did just murk themselves. So we'll see. So far, I haven't really disliked anything. But if this happens one more time, that might be the first thing I dislike about this series. So next, let's go with the next thing. And that's about Qiao Xian. Which, at this point, I'm just gonna, like, if I could talk to Qiao Xian, I'd just be like, girl, listen, 顺其自然, which is go with the flow. Because that's pretty much all you can do when Sui Bichu and Feng Xiao are in a room together. You just kind of gotta go with whatever they're going with. Because it's like, huh? What? Do you? I'm sorry. Huh? Anyway, moving on. Look, I know that Cui Bichu is one of the chiefs of the Zuoyue Bureau, but this man needs a career in acting because he is always making up some hilarious crap. And like, I be trying not to laugh. I be trying not to laugh so freaking hard. Y'all don't know. It is a challenge, okay? A challenge. Anyway, I'm wondering if he lost everything, if he would be like, maybe I should become an actor because I think he should. And then the other thing that I want to say about him being in disguise as this whole nephew with his wife or whatever. And when he finally met Duan Qihu, and Duan Qihu was like, how's your uncle doing? Basically, how's the king? And he started talking, and the book was saying that basically many of the things that he said were true. And it reminded me of something my mother had taught me a couple years ago before we disconnected. And that was, you only need a little bit of truth to sell a lie. And that's basically what's been happening here. With him, he's like, okay, let me use some facts that I know about and then just add something extra in there. Makes it very, very convincing. So the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is actually going to be on page 88 if you'd like to defer back to it if you have the books, which if you don't, that's fine. But of course, I always recommend you guys get the books. It's about the Hongman banquet. In case anyone does not know what that is or you're not currently at your book, they have a footnote, but it's a banquet in which you're trying to murder your guest. And it's specifically referring to a famous episode in 206 BC when the future Han Emperor Liu Bang escaped an attempted murder by his rival Xiang Yu. And there was like a sword dance at a festival held in his honor. And I think this was actually mentioned in the previous book as well. Yes, it was. So there's just a little bit more of an elaboration because I don't think I really gave one last time. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed these 4 chapters. And yeah, I think it's the weekend now. Yes, it is. So you all enjoy your weekend and I will see you all Monday. 我爱你们。